Hey, what's up guys, it's Nick2, and today I'm incredibly excited to show you guys an absolutely ridiculous Trickster build that does some of the highest, if not the highest damage in all of Outriders. As you can see, at just Apocalypse tier 29, I'm able to hit for upwards of 35 million damage per headshot with a pretty suboptimal build, killing the Arbiter in literally just a few shots. To put this into perspective, Plato Bear's nearly perfected Firepower Technomancer build at Apocalypse tier 37 averages about 20 to 25 million damage per headshot, while being 8 Apocalypse tiers higher and with almost perfect gear. And I wouldn't say that FP Techno is bad by any stretch of the imagination, it's still a good option. With that in mind, Trickster can do nearly 50% more than that while significantly lower level and with worse gear, which makes a very big difference. Pretty sure if I was APOC tier 37 with better gear, I'd be doing well over 100 million damage per shot, but we'll have to wait and see. You get the point though, the damage is just crazy. One of the main problems that Trickster has had recently is that either you seem to do a good amount of boss damage and have really bad AoE, or you do decent AoE and have bad boss damage. Luckily, this build doesn't fall short in any aspect. Not only does it have some of the best, if not the single best boss damage in the game, it also has the literal best ad clear that Trickster is capable of achieving by taking advantage of Time Rift. Honestly, I could talk about this build forever and how insane it is, and I'm just super ecstatic that Trickster is unironically very good. I'd really appreciate if you guys could drop a like and help share the video, because honestly, I just want everyone to know how good Trickster really can be. Before I get into the video, I want to give a big thanks to today's sponsor, The Hunter Call of the Wild. The Hunter Call of the Wild is an immersive open world hunting game from Expansive Worlds where you can hunt over 60 animal species around the world. You can play alone or together with friends in multiplayer. An all-new Reserve DLC titled Raventuli Coast just released. It's set in Finland and allows you to explore a vast and rich nature spanning rocky archipelagos, wild fields, thick spruce forests, and vibrant felt hills. You can hunt 19 different animal species such as western capercaillie, hopefully I said that right, black grouse, brown bear, white-tailed deer, and raccoon dog. Raventuli Coast has the largest number of animal species ever featured in a reserve. You can use the accompanying water layout blind to conceal yourself from waterfowl, ducks, and upland birds while in water. Discover memorable geographical landmarks and experience the glory of the Northern Lights. Raventuli Coast is already out, so get it now, and a huge thanks to the Hunter Call of the Wild for sponsoring this video. Alright, let's just get into the build. There's an absolute ton of things that we want to talk about here. It is incredibly important to understand how this build works, because if you don't understand how it works, you're going to build it wrong, and you're going to, most importantly, play with it wrong, and you're just going to do 0 damage. At the end of the video, I'm going to have everything timestamped. At the end of the video, at the very least, watch when I explain how you want to play with the build, because if you play with it improperly and you don't take advantage of twisted around snapshotting and other things, which I will go into detail on, you're going to do literally half or even a third or 1/4 as much damage as is your potential. All that is very important. The main crux of the build is that we are going to be converting anomaly power into firepower, which enables us to get upwards of 10 to 12 million anomaly power and firepower, simultaneously giving us thousands of percentages of weapon damage. Alright, so when it comes to the skills, we're going to be using Hunt the Prey, which is pretty obvious and pretty standard. You almost need it as your mobility skill. Not only is it like the best mobility skill in the game, but also pairing this with instant reload, this is going to be how we're going to never run out of twisted rounds, which is the most important thing with this build. For the next skill, we're using Time Rift. The reason that we're using Time Rift is we need a deception skill, and the 2 deception skills that are legitimately good are going to be Time Rift or Vendor's Knife. You might think, why not Vendor's Knife? Shield Beast gear drops with a whole bunch of Vendor's Knife mods on it. The reason being is that you need like 5 or 6 mods for Vendor's Knife to actually be good in AoE situations, while Time Rift needs literally 1 or 2 mods maximum to be able to just completely kill everything on the map. Also, I just like the cooldown, the animation is a lot cleaner, and overall I just think it is a better skill. You can use Vendor's Knife if you want, but trust me, Time Rift is definitely what you want to do, and it's going to be way easier to set up. You'll end up having like 1 dead mod on your Shield Beast gear because it just all of it rolls with Vendor's Knife stuff, but you can just deal with having 1 mod that isn't good, and it's perfectly fine. Alright, getting into the class tree, tested a whole bunch of variations of this, and this is what I believe to be the absolute best with this. Basically, you're just going down the bottom tree to get all this additional anomaly power percent, you get AP whenever you do a deception, and a movement skill, you get some extra assault weapon damage based on how many AP nodes you have. Most importantly, you get this melee skill node. Anytime you activate a melee skill, it gives you 30% AP, which is actually very important in terms of how you want to play with the build. I tested out going further down into the tree and getting the additional 15% firepower based on your anomaly power. You would think this is a no-brainer, but it actually ends up being significantly worse. The reason being is that going into the top tree here allows you to get 35% weapon damage when you activate a movement skill and 35% when you activate a deception skill. Later on, I'm going to be talking about diminishing returns when it comes to weapon damage percent. However, these weapon damage percent nodes seem to either be separate multipliers, or they seem to scale off of pre-existing weapon percent damage. I don't really know how. I'm not really going to test that super extensively. But basically, these nodes don't appear to be affected by diminishing returns when it comes to our overall weapon damage and firepower amount. So this ends up actually being really, really good. And then we're also able to get close range weapon damage, which is just 15% multiplicative, 20% extra crit, which is very good. Weapon damage here isn't ideal, and then we just get some armor piercing and more close range damage. Armor piercing comes into play if you have something very specific, which we'll talk about later in the mod section. Overall, this is going to be the best skill tree. I would just copy it exactly. You could test using Shadow's Embrace if you want, but trust me, I've tested it and it is not worth. The Pax Tree is basically the entire reason that this build is allowed to work. So first off, we get Trigger Man, which just increases how much damage we do for each skill on cooldown, which ends up being really, really powerful. And then we have Lies and Deception, which gives you a ton of shield anytime that you activate a deception skill. And our Time Rift is on a very low cooldown, so just this node alone is going to allow us to get about 60% shield every single time that we pop our Time Rift, which pairs perfectly with Shield Beast. Failsafe Protocol just gives you a little bit of survivability. The main thing here is Power Overwhelming, which is going to increase our firepower by 40% of our anomaly power whenever we're using an assault weapon. This is why I'm using an AR, double gun, whatever. And lastly, we have the Capstone Perpetuum Trickery, which is going to give us 50% extra anomaly power after we get pretty much 5 headshots, and then we can consume this extra anomaly power right when we use our Twisted Rounds, which is going to immediately just increase how much firepower it gives. The activating damage skills increases your assault weapon damage isn't really all that good. We don't really care about that. The reason we're not using Goals Beyond Understanding is because the additional anomaly power here, basically we're stacking a whole bunch of multiplicative anomaly power, and it just ends up scaling our AP pretty out of control here. So Perpetuum Trickery is pretty much a must with this. Goals Beyond Understanding is pretty good damage-wise, however, it does seem to bug out a lot of the time, and ultimately just not going to be as good as 50% AP. When it comes to the Ascension Tree, this is pretty important. The first thing that you want to max out is going to be anomaly damage, and then you want to max out anomaly power. Second to that, you could either go close range or crit. I think crit is ultimately going to be, close range is going to be your best bet early on, and then you want to go into crit, and then you want to go into damage against elites, and I just went to magazine size just for the fun of it. You don't really have to. Weapon damage percent isn't really going to do anything because it's going to give you about 10%, and when you scale up to 4,000% weapon damage, 10% is going to be less than, a 2% difference or whatever. So this is not really all that significant. I would recommend just going into other things. I think at some point, Resistance Pierce and Status Power is going to be really, really good. It kind of just depends on what we're actually using. Armor Pierce could be good as well. Depends on what we're using mod-wise, which we'll talk about. So first off, we'll talk about weapons, and then we'll get into the mods. The weapons are incredibly important. However, you have a ton of different variation here. The main thing that matters when it comes to your weapon, you need to have Mage's Rage plus Anomaly Enhancement. If you do not have those two mods, this build will not function. I repeat, you have to have Mage's Rage and Anomaly Enhancement. Luckily for you guys, Final Penance literally just rolls with Mage's Rage plus Anomaly Enhancement on it for free. Alternatively, the Damascus always rolls with Anomaly Enhancement, so you could then just put on Mage's Rage. These are two pretty good options. Double Gun, or Final Penance rather, I think is going to be your best option for mobbing, while the Tactical AR is going to be the absolute best option for bossing. ARs do the most damage in the entire game, however, you simply do so much per bullet damage that using an AR in mob clearing situations actually ends up just being really bad because the magazine size is really small, and we're not going to be using the mod ammo bargain. We're not going to be getting our ammo back per kill. So because it's pretty much just a dead mod when you could just use a Final Penance, but also Final Penance, you literally one-shot elites with the Final Penance full auto spraying, so you do not need the extra damage from the AR. The AR is simply just for whenever you are doing bosses. The best roll that you want for any gun is going to be crit damage, close range damage, Mage's Rage plus Anomaly Enhancement, and then the third perk in a perfect world will be Dark Sacrifice, such as my Final Penance right here, which is literally God Roll because it's 25% multiplicative weapon damage bonus. I'm pretty sure I need to 100% test that it actually works that way with this build. Kind of difficult to test a lot of stuff with this, and I kind of just started working on the build yesterday, so there's a lot to kind of test, and I plan to make an updated version of the build once it's absolutely perfect. But for the third mod, I mean, it's going to be hard enough getting a gun with Mage's Rage and Anomaly Enhancement. Like, this is the best purple that I got after an entire day of farming non-stop, and the third mod is literally dead. I would just make sure 100% get Mage's Rage plus Anomaly Enhancement and focus on the rest of it later. You could use any weapon that you want because the build does so much pure bullet damage. You could use, like, for example, I have this Time Ripper here that actually ends up being pretty good. Not that one because it doesn't have anomaly enhancement. This one that I got is actually pretty good, but normal ARs aren't that great. You could use a submachine gun like the Fatal Symbiont. You could use an Inferno Seed that I got with Mage's Rage. The Damascus offering. LMGs aren't great, but it's an okay option. Generally, though, I would definitely just stick with the Final Penance and then just have some random purple AR that rolled with anomaly enhancement for bossing. For the third mod that you want on your AR, sorry if this is a bit redundant, Dark Sacrifice would be really good, but literally anything would be fine that provides a different status effect, because being able to take advantage of additional status effect multipliers such as Euthanizer, Shatter, Bullet Kindling, those sorts of things would be really good with this build. So if you got like Noxious Spawns for Toxic, Wrath of Moloch for Burn, Omen would actually potentially be best in slot because it provides a 10% debuff as well as applying bleed. There's a ton of options here. Literally just use whatever you get and then take advantage of it. All right, now let's get into the really important stuff, which is the gear. Like I mentioned in the intro of the video, my gear is suboptimal. I'm going to talk about what I think the best options are. I don't entirely know what is best in slot right now because it depends exactly on what we're actually capable of looting in the game, because there are, of course, restrictions there. However, what is best in slot is going to include 3-piece shield beasts and 2 pieces of purples. The 3 pieces of shield beasts that you want are going to be the helmet, the chest, and the pants. The reason for this is that they are going to roll with anomaly power, close range damage, which is going to be the stats that you want. Firepower on your gear isn't going to do anything. The reason being, we end up getting about 10 million firepower. Getting an additional 30,000 firepower doesn't do anything. This is the same reason. For this same reason, getting flat firepower mods on our gear isn't going to do anything. Getting like Sharp Eye, for example, 81k firepower stacking 3 times, like 240k firepower or whatever. 240k firepower sounds like a lot, and then when you compare it to 10 to 12 million, it's a very, very small percentage, so it actually ends up being incredibly minimal damage-wise. What's the best thing to do is literally just stack up flat AP. The reason that the chest, helmet, and the pants are the best is because anomaly power doesn't roll on the gloves or the boots here. The main issue with the Shield Beast gear is also that any piece that is not the helmet or the chest is going to roll with a Vendor's Knife mod, which is pretty much a dead mod. I kind of just deal with having one dead mod on the build. It's perfectly fine because the build is insane regardless. Now let's talk about all the mods in no particular order, which ones I have, and then at the end I'll go over some honorable mentions. Again, I don't know what's technically best in slot, but I'll talk about which ones I think are mandatory. I had to change the mod on my helmet because I was actually just using something for bossing, and when I do the general gameplay, I just swap it over to this Time Rift thing. So for my helmet, you want to use a Strong Twist, absolutely mandatory. The reason being is this additional 20% firepower is actually going to affect the 20% that you see in the card here. So 20% additional firepower here means 20% flat AP or firepower. So this is going to make our 8 million go up to nearly 10 million basically. So super, super good mod there. Then I have a long range for Time Rift. This is not mandatory for bosses or even for mobbing, but it pretty much makes Time Rift just completely clear out maps. You press the button and it just flies through and just kills everything. Dead Clock you would think would be a bad mod. We tested this and it seems that Dead Clock is actually multiplicative weapon damage on top of all your other weapon damage, similar to the stuff that I was explaining within the skill tree. So Dead Clock actually seems to be really good. It's difficult to take advantage of it all the time because your skills have such a low cooldown, but it's actually fairly decent. On the chest here I have Dum Dum Bullets, which for the same reason of Dead Clock seems to be on its own multiplier. Again, a lot of this stuff is really difficult to test. I've tested as much as I could, and I wouldn't be feeding you guys completely false information. I don't exactly know how the math ends up working out, but these sources of weapon damage are definitely not affected by diminishing returns, such as additional firepower would be. Anyway, on the chest, we have Dum Dum Bullets, extra damage, really good. Skull Piercer is going to give you a lot of additional crit damage, which is really, really strong. Maybe not mandatory for the build, but it just rolls on the chest, and it's a pretty good mod. So I think it's all right, although it's not great for mobbing, because for mobbing, you're not really landing crits, because you're just hip fire spraying with your gun. And then we have Captain Hunter here. I mean, Captain Hunter, no brainer, 16% damage against elites. Then on the pants, we have Anomaly Echo, which is flat anomaly power, which is very, very good, because with this build, we are scaling our percentage anomaly power very, very high with Mage's Rage, Shield Beast, Perpetuum Trickery, and our skill tree. All of this flat anomaly power is going to be multiplied by an insane amount, especially once we have everything stacked up. So getting flat anomaly power is the most important thing with this build, and Anomaly Echo is one of the best versions of this. The firepower that we get from this, again, is worthless. Then we have Trophy, which is just a completely dead mod. Then we have a little bit of Pain, which is the entire reason that Time Rift is actually able to just kill everything. As you can see, it says using the skill deals 2 million damage over 6 seconds right now, and that's with me not having any anomaly power stacked up. I usually have about 10 times more anomaly power than this, so it ends up doing about 20 to 30 million damage actually fully stacked up. And that's not even taking into account damage multipliers, that's just what it actually shows on the card. So a little bit of pain will actually on bosses do about 15 to 20% of your damage, and when you're doing like full trials maps, it'll do like half your damage because it just completely kills everything. And this is why Time Rift is so good. An alternative to a little bit of pain is Pain Transfer. I don't think it's as good because a little bit of pain you can just throw Time Rift down and literally walk away, while Pain Transfer you actually need to Time Rift and then shoot multiple guys, which can be a little bit annoying. But Pain Transfer is a good option until you can get a little bit of pain. You do not need both. A little bit of pain by itself is insane. My gloves here are really bad. Like I mentioned, firepower is completely worthless with this build because we're stacking so much already. You want anomaly power to scale it off of all those percentages. And then I have close range damage here, which is really good. Just make sure that your gloves and your boots have close range damage because that is a multiplicative source of damage. So it's just going to give you flat 11% additional damage, assuming you're under 100%, whatever stupid math stuff. It'll just give you a whole bunch of extra damage, and it's just straight up another multiplier. So take advantage of that. Trample the Weak I have here, in theory, should be one of the best mods with this build with Time Rift because Time Rift actually inflicts weakness. However, for whatever reason, weakness lasts for literally half of a second on the Arbiter, so this is a dead mod, which is why I consider my gloves to be trash, on top of literally just missing anomaly power. Personal space, like I just mentioned with close range damage, is really good. Just multiplicative extra damage, really good. And Arms Anomaly is one of the best mods, if not the best mod, for this build, because getting flat AP is very, very good. And then my boots, which are also pretty bad, they don't have anomaly power. I don't know if Hyperloop is good with the build. Hyperloop does not synergize well with Dead Clock, putting it on cooldown so you deal extra damage, and also the stuff in the Pax Tree, putting on cooldown so you deal extra damage. However, Hyperloop is good for getting additional shield because every time that you use Hunt the Prey, it's actually going to give you a good amount of shield. So you can use it back to back, getting your shield up to nearly 100%, pretty much just with Hunt the Prey and Time Rift. And it's really good for mobbing. If I were to play with this build all the time and what I would figure to be best in slots, I would just have a different pair of boots that didn't have Hyperloop on them, and I would swap to those for when I fight the boss. And then when I add clear or I'm doing trials maps, I'd keep on Hyperloop because the mobility is really good. Then we have instant reload here. Anytime that we Hunt the Prey, instantly reloads our whole magazine. This is absolutely mandatory. The reason that we are not using ammo bargain here is because we do not need it. Having Hunt the Prey with 2 Hunt the Prey cooldowns and having a final penance or whatever makes it to where you don't have to worry about your ammo really all that much, as long as you just aren't using a tactical AR in mobbing scenarios. But I mean, the cooldown of Hunt the Prey is like 4 seconds or whatever, you know, you'll be able to have ammo just fine. And I have Sharp Eye, which I consider to be completely dead and doesn't help me. I have a list of other mod options that I think are actually fairly good in case you can't get all the mods that I have, but also I don't think that I have best in slot, and I don't know exactly what best in slot is yet. Will require more testing, but here are some other options. Power Simulation is very good for flat anomaly power, which I was explaining earlier, and I swapped my Time Rift range to that for bosses if I'm trying to get fast boss kills. Anomalic Caliber is good because it gives you 30% resist pierce, and if you pair that with Unstoppable Force, it gives you a ton of additional anomaly power percent, which can be fairly strong. And then if you wanted to further build into that, you could get Achilles Heel, which increases your crit damage based on how much resistance pierce you have, and you can stack more resistance pierce in your Ascension tree, as well as you get some resist pierce in your skill tree. Geiger's Wave is pretty good not only for ad clear, it's going to give you a vulnerable status on your Time Rift, which is really strong. I don't think it's that good when you are trying to do bosses. The reason being is that vulnerability falls away really, really quickly. But if you get some status power on either your gloves, your boots, or your weapon, that status power could enable vulnerability to last longer, and then this would actually be best in slot for the build because vulnerability is 15% extra damage, which is really good. Then lastly, we have Danger Close. It's just a little bit of extra AP. I don't really think it's that good, but it's not a dead mod, I guess. So be on the lookout for that. Outside of that, what would probably be perfect is getting a weapon that's going to give you a T3 mod that's going to apply a status, and then using a mod that's going to increase your damage to enemies affected with that status, such as Tainted Blood giving you 16%, pair that with Bloody Boost, that's 24% extra damage just from getting Bleed, and you get an Omen on your gun, for example, 34% extra damage, like that's kind of insane. Or you could get like T3 Freeze, probably not that great. You could get Stigmatized or Noxious Spawns, so you could take advantage of Radical Therapy and Euthanizer. There's a lot of different options there, but I do think that that would end up being best because it's another multiplier and it's just so much extra damage. But it really just depends on what weapon you're actually lucky enough to get. Here's a very poorly made infographic of all the different mods, etc. Like I mentioned, my gear is not perfect. If you want any more nuanced explanation as to why I'm making certain mod decisions, why they're good, etc., or what is actually best, you could always just skip back in the video, and I pretty much explained everything. The infographic is pretty much there just so you guys can reference it. So hopefully it's helpful, and if it is helpful, please make sure to drop a like and subscribe. Now let's talk about how you actually want to use the build, which, oh my god, is it important. The first thing that is worth noting is how we're going to snapshot Twisted Rounds, what that actually means, and what we're going to accomplish and achieve by doing that. Second is going to be how you want to fulfill the rotation perfectly against a boss. First off, let's talk about what snapshotting Twisted Rounds actually means. So right now you can see that when I activate my Twisted Rounds, it says that it's going to increase my firepower by 510,000. This firepower amount is directly correlated to how much anomaly power I have. So right now you can see that I have 929,000 anomaly power. If I activate my Time Rift, which is not only going to give me shield for anomaly power, but it's also going to proc some stuff within my skill tree, my anomaly power is going to go up by a pretty small portion there. It went up to about 1.7 million. Now you can see that my Twisted Rounds is going to increase my firepower by another 876,000. Pretty much what you want to do is stack up all your anomaly power as much as possible and then pop your Twisted Rounds, because once you pop your Twisted Rounds, this firepower amount is going to last the entire duration of Twisted Rounds, and we're pretty much never going to lose our Twisted Rounds. So ideally, you get as much anomaly power as possible, and then that's going to scale up how much firepower you're going to get, and then you pop your Twisted Rounds. If you pop it immediately, it's only going to get that base value of 500,000, so you're not going to be able to scale your firepower insane. This ends up being really crazy because we're pretty much double dipping into this extra firepower bonus, because we're scaling our AP really quickly. We're then going to increase the base card that we're getting with Twisted Rounds, but we're also just converting all that extra AP into more firepower anyway. But the way the Twisted Rounds works by default is it's going to convert anomaly power into firepower. So we're basically able to double dip with all that anomaly power, and that's why we do so much damage. So right here you can see that it's 876,000. Now let's just see what it actually ends up getting to once we stack up a little bit of anomaly power. So this is kind of scuffed to do in this map. This is probably a really bad example of it, but I'm pretty much just going to do a more scuffed version of it. I'm not going to get like absolutely maximum anomaly power because it can be a little bit tedious to do because it requires landing headshots. But I'm just gonna spam my gun a little bit, get my shield bonus maxed out. I'm gonna try to land some crits. All right, that's probably good enough. And then I'm going to pop my Twisted Rounds. As you can see right now, I have 11 million firepower, 10 million anomaly power. We check our skills, it's going to increase my firepower by 6 million, and that is a suboptimal snapshot. You could get significantly more crits. You could get you could have like absolute maximum shield. There's different ways to get more anomaly power, and I'll talk about the absolute perfect way to do it. But now you can see my gun is able to do absolutely ridiculous amounts of damage. And let me just go up to this crawler so you guys can actually see. So prior to this, look, I did 18 million there, but again, the snapshot wasn't perfect, and also you need to like stack up stuff after the fact. But basically, this allows me to completely one-shot stuff, 20 million, because we're able to double dip and snapshot all of this additional anomaly power and firepower. If you are not snapshotting, if you are not taking advantage of how this interacts, you are not going to do a lot of damage with this build. Alright, so here I just have a boss clip that I'm going to show you guys, and I'm going to go over exactly the rotation that you want to do and how you can stack up all the additional anomaly power. There's a lot of different anomaly power sources here, so it's fairly important understanding all the different ways that you can actually scale up your anomaly power. The crazy thing is that you don't have to do this perfectly. It's really annoying to do. Honestly, you'd probably be better off doing like half of it, trying to maximize it a little bit, and kind of just doing whatever. I do it, or at least I try to do it optimally every time because I want to see the biggest numbers possible. But the damage with this build is so crazy that you do not need to play with it perfectly. But anyways, let's just get into how you want to actually do it. So first off, pretty much, sorry, this is a little bit scuffed, but it's way easier to edit this way. So first off, you want to immediately Time Rift. The Arbiter is super annoying to do this on, by the way, because he just like moves around and stuff, but this is a fairly good kill. So first off, you want to Time Rift immediately. What this is going to do is it's going to not only put your skill on cooldown, get you all that extra anomaly power, it's also going to start stacking your shield. So as you can see, my shield is going to build up slowly because with our Pax Tree node, this is going to give us shield. And then we're going to Hunt the Prey immediately in. This is going to give us our skill tree node, as well as going to proc some shield. Now what we want to do immediately after that is start to land some crits to stack our Mage's Rage, our Perpetuum Trickery, and our Arms and Anomaly. This is going to scale our AP after the fact. You do not want to land crits before landing the Hunt the Prey and the Time Rift, because the additional anomaly power seems to scale multiplicatively off of your previous multiplicative anomaly power. So Mage's Rage is best used after the fact. Now that you landed some crits, right after you land your last crit, you want to then melee, and then you want to Twisted Rounds. You could either melee and then Twisted Rounds immediately after after that in a perfect world, or you could wait for your shield to be a little bit closer to 100% by activating another time rift. The reason that I didn't do that is because the boss often right here, he was about to like swing on me and I shouldn't want to risk him hitting me, but you could, for maximum damage, you would want to time rift there instead of immediately popping your twisted rounds, and then you'll have 100% shield. The main thing that you want to note or take note of is you want to make sure that you're benefiting from the additional anomaly power from your skill tree, benefiting from Mage's Rage anomaly power and Perpetuum Trickery by landing at least 5 headshots. You want to make sure that your shield beast or your shield in general is stacked up at least 50%. And then if you want to be an absolute min-maxer, you can melee for the extra 30%, as you can see me do right here. So I'm going to melee, and then I'm going to pop my twisted rounds, and then as you can see, I only did like 14 million damage. The reason is that I basically lost the anomaly power and the weapon damage bonus from my Hunt the Prey and my Time Rift, so I'm just going to activate those again, and then that's going to stack again, and then as you can see, now I'm able to shoot him in the face and just absolutely melt him. Did 34 million there, but if you have, you know, 100% shield, etc., you could probably do about 37, 38 million. So just to show it again, kind of, I'll put it in, can I put it in like 0.75? I'll put it in 0.75 speed and kind of just go over it again, and then you guys can see the entire boss kill. So again, we're going to immediately time rift. This is going to give us some shield, and then we're going to pop our Hunt the Prey, proc our skill tree stuff, as well as give us some shield, land some headshots to get Perpetuum Trickery, Mage's Rage, melee for the extra anomaly power, instantly pop our twisted rounds, and then we pop Hunt the Prey and Time Rift again to proc those skill tree nodes again, and then we can just shoot him in the face and he instantly dies. In terms of how you want to use this for mobbing, you do the exact same thing. It's not all that important, like you don't have to do it perfectly like I'm doing in this video, or in this clip rather. You just want to do it decently enough. You want to make sure that you at least have some shield, at least get Mage's Rage stacked up before popping your twisted rounds, because it will literally double, triple your damage. And if you do like half as much damage as I'm doing here, does it really matter? Like, once I start actually shooting the guy with my twisted rounds, look how fast he dies, right? I pop my stuff, and then look, I look at him, and he just falls over. Does it really matter if you do 17 mil instead of 34 mil? Not really. That's kind of the glory of the build. You can play it terribly, and you'll still do an insane amount of damage. I know that it's a little bit complicated. It takes a lot to get used to. It took me a lot to get used to, and I still am playing it pretty badly, and I still need to practice with it, but especially because the Arbiter is really annoying. But honestly, I wouldn't stress too much about it. I would just make sure that you at least get the basic anomaly power scaling and then pop your stuff. And you don't have to worry about weaving in the melee, making sure you have 100% shield, making sure that everything's timed perfectly. I wouldn't worry too much about it. Just at least get the basics down. I'm sorry if any of that was confusing. I just tried to convey it the absolute best way that I could. It is a little bit confusing how you actually want to play the build, but if you have any questions, feel free to leave it down in the comments, and I'll try to answer it to the best of my ability, and I'll make an updated version of this build whenever I get better gear and I am higher Apocalypse tier. I'm really excited to see how much damage the build can do at like maximum Apocalypse tier. I think it could do upwards of 100, 150 mil, maybe 200 million damage with like absolutely perfect gear. But anyways, if you guys did enjoy, please make sure to drop a like, subscribe for videos similar to this one. I'd really appreciate you guys sharing the video with more people. I haven't been this excited to show a build and this proud of a build in a really long time, and I'm just super happy that like Trickster's my main character, man. Trickster's the character that I've played the most, so I'm just like incredibly happy that it ended up being this good. And yeah, I just really hope that you guys love it. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you guys later. Peace.